which is good. And I think we can put up some data that we have on this. We looked at it again, and for through October 31st, so for 10 months, uh, the trends are the same. July and August are higher crime periods, and so the numbers um, uh, go up. The raw numbers go up, but the trends stay the same. So it's not like the 4 months of July through October didn't had more crime in them than the 4 months, any 4 months in the January to June period. But that's happened in every year. The trend line in terms of bringing crime down continues, which is critical. There are some stubborn things that are still out there. One of them is what on the data uh, is called theft other. And I think, do we have the table? Can we show, Kevin, can we show the table up on the screen? Okay, so if you look, uh, the cells highlighted in green are ones that are down. The cells highlighted in red are up compared to other years. Um, and and sex abuse is up. I don't know what explains that, but theft others, retail theft is largely retail theft. And we all know of all the challenges that we're confronting with retail theft. That continues to be a significant issue for us. Also, an issue for us in this area in particular is we've seen crimes that we never saw before. We had a carjacking on at 42nd and Van Ness, and we've had some other carjackings that have happened in the area. I've lived in this area for 30 plus years, and I can't recall other times where we saw crimes like that. Today, there was an episode of a scuffle where there was a knife drawn in Ward 3. You don't hear about that very often. We've had some things, some sprees where there have been groups that have gone to different businesses, once on in Palisades, once in Glover Park, where they tore out cash registers and ATMs in what was a kind of organized gang thing. That's not the kind of thing that we're used to seeing around here. And nobody wants to get used to seeing those kinds of things. And so it's scary when stuff like that is happening. And that's an issue here, but everywhere in the city, there's that issue and more. And so what have we tried to do in response? On those things, on the recent things, and a big thing that I have tried to do in response is really partner with MPD. Uh, One of the first things that I did when I got on the council was I signed up for the Community Engagement Academy, which is an 8-week program that I'd recommend to folks, where you spend 2 hours each week learning about a different dimension of the force. And it's really important to understand how your partners are operating. And that was a great education for me to be doing that. A second thing is just forging a solid relationship with MPD and with the second district. And I have to say, Commander Savoy is going to come up, and she has been a phenomenal partner, as has Captain Haskis and others on the second district. Whenever anything happens, they give us a heads up, and we reach out and try to get information and try to be helpful. So as an example, we have these recent episodes that are bad, but they are totally on it. And some of them may already have been solved. Some of them, the hope is they will be solved soon. We've had some pretty dramatic things that they have solved. And part of it is supporting and working hand in glove with them. And I'm really pleased with our ability to work together. Um, the a different set of things is recruiting and retention of MPD officers. There has been a sense that MPD is understaffed, and we need to have officers out on the street, engaging with the community, checking in with the different businesses. And that has been from day one a thing that I've been urging the second district to do. But part of the challenge of that is they need to have the bodies to do it. And I think we and the council have done well in taking steps that can improve recruitment and retention. Bonuses, a new legislation to allow retirees to stay on and work and not compromise their retirements, but build for their retirements. All different kinds of things that we can be doing together, and we have been doing those things. So, did the legislation secure DC, where there was a concern that certain of our laws had gotten out of whack and were creating the wrong set of incentives and making it more difficult for MPD to do their job and creating a sense of impunity. Some of that, and so we took steps through that legislation, working very closely with the mayor, with the chief. Really hats off to Brooke Pinto for the work that she did in leading that effort. And I think we were able to make a significant difference. Those things matter, and we're going to keep doing all of those things. One thing that I saw today that I thought was interesting was there was an Axios report about crime in the district compared to crime in other cities. And in 2023, crime went up everywhere. Went up a little more here, but it went up everywhere. In 2024, crime has gone down everywhere. And so we're part of something that is bigger, and we need to grapple with the things that are bigger. Part of, I think, and everybody's going to have a theory about why crime has been the way that it's been, but some of it, I think, is the earthquake that is COVID and the impact that that's had on all different dimensions of our population, particularly our kids. And that's a thing that's happening all around the country. We need to have accountability. We need to have enforcement. We're all in trying to make sure that we're doing that properly. But we also have to be addressing the kinds of things that are rippling through our communities as a result of COVID. And so that's where a different piece of it is responding to what I would call root causes of crime, where if you have thousands of people who feel like they have no hope, then you're going to have crime. And so you need to be addressing those things. And we've been doing things like trying to fund increased access to social workers, increased options for behavioral health. I have legislation about out of school time. We need to give folks opportunities. Out of school time, I'll just use as an example. When I was growing up, there was a commercial. It was like 4 out of 5 dentists surveyed say, I don't know, I might be older than others, but maybe you remember those commercials. Well, 80% of police chiefs say the most important thing you can do to reduce juvenile crime is have quality out of school time programming to give kids options. So while we're doing all of these enforcement and accountability things, it is critical that we keep support for that, the tackling the root causes, because over the long term, that's the thing that's likely to make us the most safe. I want to touch for a second before I invite Commander Savoy to come up. One of the things that comes up in this area is we have a lot of police calls that around concerns inside of some of the apartment buildings, often the assumption is that it relates to tenants who are benefiting from vouchers. There's been a big change in the area with large numbers of folks who have moved in who are benefiting from vouchers. And there's been an increase in the number of police calls that have been going on, and folks assume to some degree that the two things are related. And we've also had the terrible episodes where we lost 2 children to blunt force injuries in the last month or two. And part of another thing that we need to do is we have to have accountability in that space. We have too many tenants who feel like they're threatened by other tenants, and we have to have accountability in that space. But we also have to find a way to more fully serve the people in our community who need services. And we need to look for ways to make sure that they're getting the support they need so that we don't see the kind of activities that we've seen. So I feel like I may have gone on for too long. I want to give the panelists a chance to speak and then take questions from the audience and from online. But for now, I think I would like to turn it over to Commander Savoy so that she can do her presentation. Want to come on up?
Thank you, Councilmember Frumin. Hi, everyone. My name is Tatiana Savoy. I am the commander for the 2nd District. I just had my first year anniversary 2 days ago, so I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to serve the community. We've had a good working relationship with what Councilmember Frumin was just discussing. One of the things that I really wanted to focus on when I first took over command last year in November of 2023 was some of the things that Councilmember Frumin kind of already touched up on. More importantly, I felt that at some point we kind of stirred away from things that we were maybe overlooking from the street to maybe someone's doorstep, or the street to a business door. And one of the things that was for me, my priority was kind of getting the officers back into the neighborhoods, getting them back into the sidewalks, getting them out of the cars and back into the streets. So the beginning of this year, I stood up a mountain bike unit. I'm not sure if you all have seen any of them riding around in the streets, but we have had much success with standing that unit up, and I tend to expand on that in the upcoming months. Do you want to put the statistics back up, Kevin? Thank you. Okay. So it's just to kind of to talk about what we're seeing here. If you look at our numbers are really moving in the right direction year to date, right? But when we talk about perception, perception feeds a lot of information, whether it's positive, whether it's negative. I could, run down these numbers, kind of what we're seeing. Why I like the numbers, I still would like to see, get a lot of feedback from you all on ways that we can improve on. I'm happy to answer any questions with these if maybe you all don't understand, from down to the one where it says theft or other. I can kind of talk about what that is or the definition of that. But again, I guess at this point, I'll just wait to see if I have any questions, and we could just wait for us to come up for the panel to answer any questions. Okay. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Commander Savoy. I want to ask Heather McGaffin, who's the director of the Office of Unified Communications, 911, to come up. And I guess, do you want to stand here? Will you be able to see? Okay, so why don't you go like that?
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thanks for having me. I am a proud Ward 3 resident. My family and I live here, and we love it a whole lot. So I'm here tonight to talk to you about what we're doing at 911, because I know that there are certainly some concerns with 911, but also to tell you a little bit about 311, because at the OUC, we are both. We are your emergency point of contact, your public safety answering point, and we are your non-emergency contact with the Mayor City Services. So next slide. Our mission remains the same, and it's to answer every call, ensure fast and accurate dispatches, and retain and support our growing team. And we're strengthening our hiring and retention. We are upgrading our technology, and we are expanding our training. So when I got here in this role about 18 months ago, these were the three things that I said we really needed to focus on. Next slide. So our 911 center has seen a significant surge in call volume and longer call duration, which means we are seeing an increased demand on our services, and we were doing it with a lot less people. Washington, D.C. is historically the fourth busiest 911 center in the nation, but when you think about the number of residents we have here, those things don't quite add up. We have about 700,000 people who call Washington, D.C. home. We swell each day with our commuters coming from the communities around Washington, D.C., and then we see about 21 million visitors a year. And while this data that I'm about to share with you doesn't necessarily do a one-for-one like it used to, because cell phones are the #1 way that we are reached at the 911 center, most of our calls don't come from Washington, D.C. area codes. They are coming from outside area codes. And like I said, back in years ago, we could really count on that data. Today, we really can't count on that data. But as you can see, our call volume from fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 23 really increased. And that's post-pandemic. That's not just in Washington, D.C. We're seeing that across the nation. We're also staying on the phone longer with people, and that's for a couple of reasons. The situations that we're dealing with are a little more complex. Our staff is now certified in a lot more things than they used to be certified in, so we can give CPR instructions, we can deliver babies. I always share the fun fact that we did that 63 times last year before fire and EMS got on the scene. We walked people through childbirth. Several of those were on the side of 295. And we also have diversion programs now. The other thing that you may have seen in the last couple of days is that last year, only about a fourth of the 911 calls, or I'm sorry, a fourth of the 911 calls that we took were not emergencies. They were people calling for things that would have better been serviced on 311. And so what we are doing when we kind of look at it is we're really explaining to people about what city services are. So you are going to be seeing a lot of work in public education around the Make the Right Call campaign. As the mayor released it yesterday, I did a couple of engagements yesterday with it. And we're going to be going out and really educating our neighbors about when you should call 911 and when you should call 311. Next slide. We also address staffing because we weren't answering the call fast enough. And so we've had 27 call takers and 5 dispatchers complete training. Just in October alone, we have the 2 incentive programs, a attendance incentive as well as a hiring incentive. And we are looking at each person individually because it's a very stressful job. So we've implemented some accountability that wasn't maybe there before, as well as a full-time wellness coordinator on board. Because what we were finding was people were taking off because they had really traumatic things happening in their personal lives. And then when you take that and you answer the call 70 to 80 times a day, where you're only dealing with traumatic incidents, it was really weighing on people. So we were looking at our staff holistically. And as of, next slide, as of Monday, we had 6 vacancies at the OUC compared to the 36 that we had in June of last year. So that's really huge, and it really directly correlates to how quickly we're able to handle calls. That's for call takers. We still have about 15 dispatch positions that we need to fill, but we had overwhelming response to that recruitment. and we are starting to onboard people in those roles as well. That helps our friends too at the Metropolitan Police Department as well as Fire and EMS because we're able to better serve them as our partner agencies. Next slide. And so when we look at the percentage of calls answered in 15 seconds or less, which is the national standard or was until June of this year, it's now 20 seconds, but we're still holding ourselves to 15 seconds because we believe that that's only fair to you as our community. In June of 2024, about 62% of the calls were answered in 15 seconds or less. And so far in November, we've taken about 50,000 calls this month, and we've answered almost 90% of those calls in the 15 seconds or less. So the average time is about 5 seconds. Of course, we're always going to have incidents where a lot of people call, car crashes, gunshots, things like that. And so there will always be spikes. And I'm not saying that you'll never sit in a queue when you call, but we're really trying to minimize that on a day-to-day basis. Next slide. So I talked a little bit about this, but you're really going to see us when you call 911. If we ask you the questions and it's not deemed an emergency, where police or fire doesn't need to come right away, we most likely are either going to send you to 311, and the 311 customer service reps can help you find the right city service, or we are going to send you to one of our diversion programs. We have the mental health diversion program at the Department of Behavioral Health. We have the telephone reporting unit. So maybe you need a police officer to write a report, but they don't necessarily have to come out to you to do that. We might send you to the nurse triage line because let's say you cut your finger with a knife while doing dishes, and maybe you need stitches. So did you know that there's clinics, 24/7 clinics around the city that can suture you? FEMS can provide you a ride there, get you sutured up, get you any medication that you might need, and get you back home in about an hour and a half compared to the average wait time in an ER, which is like 6 to 8 hours. So, and then you're also not risking maybe picking up something else while you're there. So you're going to see a lot of us. And I would say to each and every one of you, I recognize some of you from other community organizations and groups. If ever you want the 911 center to come out and do education, we do it for every age group, from kids all the way up. We are happy to do that. And I'm just happy to answer any questions that you have when the time's appropriate. So thank you.
All right, great. So we're gonna keep it moving and get us to questions. I think Assistant Deputy Attorney General Elizabeth Weiser is next, and then after that, Mr. Ross from DHS, and then we can get to questions. And I assure you, we'll leave plenty of time for questions.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Weiser. I'm the Deputy Attorney General for Public Safety at the Office of the Attorney General here in DC. Thank you for having me here tonight, Councilmember Frumin. Wonderful to be in community and be able to talk with you a little bit about the work that we're doing at the Office of the Attorney General. I'll get back in front of the podium. I trained as a trial lawyer, and as a trial lawyer, you always want to sort of be moving around the room, so it's hard for me to stick to a podium, but I understand. I'm going to do my best. So there are two things that I wanted to talk to you about briefly before we get to questions, because I'm sure that you got some questions for those of us that are here tonight. First of all, I wanted to make sure that folks in the community understand the criminal jurisdiction that we have at the Office of the Attorney General, because as we all know, DC is not a state, and so we do not have a local state's attorney here in the district. Most of the local crime that's prosecuted here in Washington, D.C. is prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office, our federal partners here in the district. So most of the violent crime that is occurring in our city is being prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office. However, the Office of the Attorney General prosecutes all crime where young people are arrested. So any crime when a perpetrator is under the age of 18, it's the Office of the Attorney General that prosecutes those cases. And so in as much as you have interest about learning about those cases, I can talk with you generally and answer any questions with regard to juvenile crime. In addition to that, the Office of the Attorney General prosecutes all traffic-related offenses. So any traffic-related DUI cases, operating while impaired, any other regulatory and reckless driving sorts of offenses, those are cases that our office handles as well. And so I just wanted to make sure at the beginning that you had a general understanding of the way prosecution is divided here in the city. The second thing that I wanted to tell you about, and this connects a little bit with what Councilmember Frumin talked about before, is that there is a new piece of legislation that's pending before the council called the SAFE Act. That is a piece of legislation that my boss, AG Schwab, advanced before the council after listening to a lot of communities talking about safety in apartment buildings and frustration, frankly, with how our nuisance laws work in the district and our ability to actually bring civil matters regarding nuisances that occur in apartment buildings. And you all may be very acquainted with our nuisance acts, but one of the great things about this new legislation is that it expands our authority where we can investigate with the assistance of MPD nuisance activity, including if there is violent crime occurring in an apartment building or around an apartment building, and we can begin a nuisance investigation in those circumstances. That broadens our authority because before it used to just be if there was evidence of drug selling in a building or prostitution in a building or I'm forgetting my third one. Thank you. Everybody knows, right? Firearms, of course. We could proceed with a nuisance action, but now that we've got this other bucket of incidents, crimes of violence, we can actually proceed. And the other thing that this act does, it requires the Department of Buildings to go in and do assessments about the safety of the buildings. It requires landlords to put in secure exterior doors and lighting and to be accountable to the Department of Buildings to make sure that the buildings are safe. And so we are excited about the prospect of this legislation advancing through the council. I want everybody to know that the hearing with regard to the SAFE Act is going to take place in early December, I believe on December 10th at 11:30 a.m. So if anybody in the community is interested in writing in a letter of support or testifying at that hearing, we welcome everybody to come in and have an opportunity to be heard about the issue with SAFE. Also, I wanted to introduce you to Juan in the back. He's our community engagement liaison here tonight. If you have questions about testifying or if you have further questions about the SAFE Act, please reach out to him and he can connect you with more resources in the community. So I look forward to your questions later. And again, thanks very much for having me.
And then now David Ross from DHS. And then when David's done, I think I'm going to ask the folks who spoke to come up so that for questions you're ready at a microphone. But David, come on up.
Thank you, Councilmember Frumin. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Ross, and I have the honor of serving as Chief of Staff with the DC Department of Human Services. I bring welcome and regrets for my fearless leader, Director Zeilinger, who could not join us tonight due to a scheduling conflict. However, I wanted to share a couple of things before we pivot to Q&A. One, we are here as the district supporting residents who are transitioning into housing to be good neighbors. And I know that has not always been an easy thing, but we're here to support you, work with you to help create great and better good neighbor agreements to ensure that regardless of how rents or mortgages are paid, all residents are showing up in a way that everyone feels safe. One popular misconception that I really need to ensure that we clarify before we go into Q&A, there is an assumption that we place residents into units, rather we tell them which buildings to go to, which apartments they should get, and that's not the truth. We encourage customers to go out and seek units that work for their family dynamic. And the reality is some parts of the city, either that they have come from or have dealt with, Ward 7 and 8 are not as resource heavy as other parts of DC, such as Wards 1, 2, or 3. I live in Ward 7. It's a food desert, but I have a car, so it's a little bit more accessible. For some of our families that do not have cars, it's very convenient for metro and grocery and hospital to be in a walkable vicinity. The last thing I want to leave you with, and I've discussed this a couple of times, including this evening with Councilmember Frumin, there are opportunities for us to do things differently. We're always open to learning. We're always opening to listening and doing better. But there are also certain programmatic aspects that we cannot change as an agency because our requirement is to follow the law. And for those of you who are interested in law and legal things of that nature, we are bound by the Homeless Services Reform Act, the HSRA, which dictates how we can and cannot serve customers with respect to homeless services. So I just want to make sure those 2 points were clarified before we begin the Q&A. And if it's all right with you, Council Member, I want to afford more time for the questions for your constituents. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. So Commander Savoy and Assistant Deputy Attorney General and Heather McGaffin, if we can get you to come on up to, is Heather still here? I just think it'll be easiest if folks are in place instead of coming back and forth as questions come in. And we have microphones here for people to ask questions, and there are folks online who may have questions. So I'm going to open it up. Oh, I see. So does anybody have any questions? Can we have you come to the microphone? I am not surprised there are questions. Can you bring it a little closer to you? Let's see. Okay, so let me react that on half of it, we did invite a representative from the U.S. Attorney. Last time that we did one of these, we had, I think the last two, we had representatives of the U.S. Attorney. This time, they weren't able to make it. I agree with you that we invited them for a reason, because I think that they have valuable input. There was a time when there was a lot of concern about prosecution rates. And that's one of the reasons why it was important to have the U.S. Attorney present to respond to that. I think that has not been raised in the same kind of way for some time. Still, we should have them. We invited them. They're in an interesting spot right now, but we invited them. A representative of the judiciary in candor, is not a thing that had occurred to me, but it's an interesting idea. I think it's a different kind of forum. It's a different kind of discussion with a representative of the judiciary, but point taken, and let us think about how to do that. Oh, let me say, in case folks can't see, so if you're online and you want to ask, you want to request to come off mute and ask a question live, use the raise your hand function on Zoom, and the staff Zoom attendant will promote you to be a speaker so you can ask your question, or use the chat function to type and submit a question, and the Zoom attendant will articulate that question for you. So, Kathy. I can. A little bit louder, maybe. A little bit closer. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So what I was wondering is, what is the DHS? How do you decide and how do you allow that what is happening and what is in
Great question. Great questions. Thank you. So first and foremost, the Home Services Reform Act outlines
Either.
how we can engage customers from.
David, can I just, because I understand people online are having trouble hearing the question, so I want to just restate into this microphone and maybe invite Robin to come near me to ask her question when the time comes. But the question was that Mr. Ross had referred to a law, and she would like to hear a description of that law. And then also on the question around caseworkers, that there's we hear anecdotally that there are folks who don't get the benefit of a caseworker. Is that the case? How are decisions made about whether or not a caseworker will be assigned, and what the kind of level of contact is that would be required? So sorry to slow it down, but we have 50 people online who are very interested and they want to know the question.
Thank you, Councilmember. So the HSRA outlines how we can serve residents, what we can require, what we can't require, the variety of services we must make available to residents, and the length of staying in each of those relevant. It's quite a lengthy. It's originally passed, I believe, in 2007 and updated in 2017. I can provide a link to Councilmember Frumin staff to ensure that this resident body has access to that. You don't have to policy every single day for that. Second, each program has a different requirement for case management. For example, our permanent support housing program, which includes our unhoused residents with some medical vulnerabilities, that requires case management. Some rapid rehousing programs, for which some residents here are familiar with, case management is voluntary for that program. We have low barrier shelters, particularly during this time. We are officially in hypothermia season, November 1st through March 31st. And so residents who are unhoused have access to come into our shelters and are not there to take care to our case management. Our goal, particularly for hypothermia, is to ensure our unhoused residents have access to safe, dignified, warm places to stay in the wintertime. What we often see with respect to questions around access to case management, not knowing who case managers are, there are several agencies in the district alone that sponsor vouchers. And of course, we have the federal Section 8 voucher. So that federal Section 8 voucher, those residents are housed right along with us, no different than the residents who are housed with DC vouchers, along with residents who pay rent through our market. And so unfortunately, residents housed through Section 8 vouchers do not have any case management by federal management. So it's really based off of the specific program and the specific agency with the case management. What we have, and I shared in some meetings in the past, we don't want you all to have to figure that out. And so if and when there is an issue with a resident who you believe is a voucher holder, first we would never confirm it. We want to maintain the privacy of our residents, but we ask that you give us all of that information after this meeting. And I take it as my responsibility to work with my counterparts at DBH, at the Housing Authority, to figure out, is this a local voucher that we need to make sure things are going right? Or if it's a federal voucher, we know that that resident will not have case management associated to that voucher, so we will work with the district program that provide that assistance.
I want to chime in a little here as well. So this is tricky territory, and it is there is confidentiality, so confidentiality is super critical. There are different kinds of vouchers, as Mr. Ross was saying, and I think it's really important to step back and acknowledge that for the vast majority of people who are vouchers, it's great. It puts a roof on them, gives them a chance to get on their feet, and they do get on their feet. There are lots of folks in different buildings who have very deeply valued their neighbors who there are challenges in one particular space, I suspect, but there is confidentiality. But the folks who have very recently exited homelessness have profound challenges. They do. And so it's those folks where we want to see that we do everything we can to help them get on their feet. And that's the place where you're most likely to really need them. Is further, and probably in thick services to help you get on your feet. And that's a thing that we're not doing in the way that I think we should. Although there's also a challenge we've had, I mean, Courtney has brought to our attention, and I have brought to my attention, families who may be benefiting from a voucher who've chosen this community maybe because there's bigger amenities here. And yet there often isn't as much for them as there might be in another place because there aren't programs for lower income people. I had a lovely woman come up to me on the playground at Merch, and she said, you know, I don't have an after school program here in the same way that I would in Ward 7 and 8 because there isn't a program targeted to my child. And I think that's a thing that we all ought to take stock of and try to make sure that we're ensuring that everybody is served. And there's a space in a number of these meetings. On the one hand, there's the concern that there are people who aren't getting services and they get real issues. And there's another impulse, which is there are people who are not getting services. Let's come together and try to figure out a way to ensure that we create the opportunity. And I think that's the thing that we ought to be having a conversation together about. Could there be a place even here on the UDC campus are there things we can do to?
Hello. Yes, how y'all doing? I'm a DC resident for 59 years. An ex-business owner, and I'm also a voucher participant. Um, I also do work with the vouchers in the homes, getting people vouchers. But I like it up here. I was raised up in this area, moved around the city, so I am a DC Washingtonian. I know every counselor all off. I even met you over in the Van Ness. We get to that. Well, my situation is this. When I walk and talk to people, I notice how people are always pointing the fingers at vouchers. But I live in a building that 3003, and we have a mixed community. We have a mixed community of problems in that building. As far as with management, how you doing, sir? And as far as with regular people living there selling drugs, and not just vouchers, but regular folks actually selling drugs. We've been trying to stomp on that because it seems like we can't get no help from nobody. And this gentleman here, he knows my work in that building. And it's like everybody's turning a deaf eye. Now, this neighborhood has changed tremendously because vouchers. But when you point a finger at the vouchers, you have to be very careful. That can cause a lawsuit because you claiming something on people or pointing drugs. Everybody who has a voucher is not ex-offender, is not a drug. Actually, I used to own a business. Lost my business because I was in a coma for 7 months. And I had to go through the program to get a voucher because, as you see, I'm wearing glasses, but I couldn't see. And I keep a cane here because I have neuropathy in both my legs. So the voucher program helped me get my housing because I couldn't go back to work. And I've been on it since 2017. And I've been working to get off of it because I'm now ready to go back to work, which that's another mess, a problem. If the voucher program, this is what I'm asking, can set up some kind of way that can help people get jobs so they can like wean them off of the program, I think that would help a little bit better. The same way that we would do with food stamps or anything. And this is our community as it is anybody else's. But it's a lot going on around here, especially in this ward. I moved from Chevy Chase to the Van Ness, which was one of the worst things of my life. I've only lived in 2 apartments. That building over there is the worst building I ever in my life lived in. And I've been there for 3 years. I'm about ready to run out. I had fought rats in my apartment this big. We catch them and kill them. We had to struggle with foul smell, which dead rats in the wall, which we're struggling, dealing with that now. Management is not doing anything. The drugs, prostitution, and everything is on the management. We've been begging for them to put cameras. People have actually got robbed, raped, assaulted in my building. Just 2 weeks ago, we had 3 robberies in daylight in my building on the 2nd, 4th, and 6th floor.
Right. I really want to thank you for coming up and offering that. I just was saying that I was at a building visiting with the tenant association last year, and there was a guy who was ranting and calling people the N-word and behaving atrociously. And I'll be candid with you. I assumed that that person was a voucher holder, and I was wrong. It was somebody who I think was being funded in that building by their family.
I correct you on that too. Remember?
Could be.
Yeah, I
Could be,
correct
that's how I
you.
did
It
it.
was someone who was not a voucher holder.
So we need to be super careful, and you're totally right. You also sort of acknowledge there are other dimensions, but that tenants association, the president was not a voucher beneficiary, the vice president of the tenants association was. And this is, the issues inside of some of our apartment buildings are very serious, and they're not just about in one population. 100% true. 100% true. Part of that is that is what motivated the Attorney General to come forward with this legislation, the SAFE Act, to try to help to tackle the issues when they arise in a building, regardless of who's the cause of it and the source of the payment of the folks who are the cause of it. That's why that legislation calls for security assessments so that we can press landlords to provide the kinds of things. I don't know how many times I've had tenants tell me, you know, we're asking for a light. We're asking for a camera on the store. And we need to get to a place where those kinds of safety precautions are provided. And that's, I've looked at trying to do legislation. The Attorney General is coming forward with legislation. We owe it to you to get something done on that because there are real issues and we need to address them. As we do it, we need to be very careful not to act as if it's one set of payers who are the source of the issue. So thank you very much for your answer.
I commend the police department because they do come in and act. That I can say. But it's when the tenants are not doing anything that help. You know, it's like a dead situation. Constant calls come up there and people not helping. Security. He's really not security. One works at night. We have concierge. We need help now. We need the management to stand up and take responsibility. I understand something about safety. I'm speaking of 3,000 people in there. We need management to stand up and take that charge because we have no cameras in the building. And actually, a couple, we police our own building because we don't want to get hurt. But I don't need but we need your help.
Well, thank you very, very much for that. Again, I do think we are pursuing legislation on that. It is a really, really important thing. And if there is a hero in this whole thing, it is MPD, which has been very responsive and dealing with these issues every day. And the numbers of calls that MPD has to respond to on these kinds of issues is enormous. And we need it to be taken care of better inside of the building, so it is not as much of a drain on MPD. There's other things that we want them out there doing, but you know, the one entity that nobody criticizes here is MPD because they really have stood up and done a great job. Rick, okay, you're also
Really quick, yes. I too wanted to jump on the We Love MPD bandwagon. I know a couple of years ago, we had an issue with a particular building in a land management company that was not trying to be cooperative but supportive. And through MPD's assistance, we hired additional security and put cameras in the building, right? And so we want to hear these things from you because where we are able to put a little bit of weight on management companies to their security protocols, we will do so. And where that doesn't work, we will make those reports to the Department of Buildings to go out and make the appropriate inspections. Second, I want to acknowledge my special assistant, Tyler Edge. If you can raise your hand in the back. Tyler has been with me for about 3 months now. And he has joined me at no fewer than 6 Saturdays. And from the feedback we have received, Tyler's working on a system. I almost don't want to share it, but it's exciting. Where we want to be able to bring it to your communities. So you type in your address and the immediate MPD district comes up and the appropriate DDH crisis response number comes up. So you don't have to go through Google or a phone book and figure out what's what. I have heard that loud and clear from residents, particularly when I think the mayor came out with a report. Calls per year, at least 25% of those are not 911 calls. They're calls that should be diverted to behavioral health support or other similar issues. So I look forward to Tyler being able that's what they are. Share. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to make sure I can.
Oh, yeah, and the employment plan is giant, and really, really important. We need to have people, the whole idea of this is to help people.
Thank you, Matt, to you and to the other panelists for this conversation tonight. And I'm Rick Nash. I'm an ANC commissioner in 3C, just to the south of where we're gathered. And I especially want to thank MPD for their focus this last year on crime, and particularly for the foot patrols, feet on the street on Connecticut Avenue. We hope that they will be sustained. We think they're effective and that they'll be expanded to other commercial areas in the ANC and the ward. I have a couple quick questions for the Deputy Attorney General, if I may. The first is, the perception is that more violent crime and other felony crimes such as carjacking is being committed by younger and younger offenders, juveniles. How has your strategy changed in the last couple of years to address that? And the second question is, another element of public safety besides crime is the other aspect of what you prosecute, motor vehicle offenses. There is perception after COVID that there is more aggressive driving, there's more dangerous driving going on. And yet I'm interested to know, how is the number of arrests for motor vehicle crimes tracking? Is it less than before? And is your office putting the same emphasis as before? Thank you.
Mr. Nash, thank you for those questions. So the perception that more young people are committing more violent crime is accurate. Particularly in the last year, we have seen an increase in children being engaged in violent crime, particularly violent gun crime. Carjacking this week, there was a lot of attention in our city about kids being involved in carjacking. I will say that I think part of the reason that there's been a focus on young people is because proportionately more young people are arrested for the crime than adults. There are a large number of carjacking crimes that are unsolved. It's a very difficult crime to actually solve. So if you look at MPD's dashboard about crime, you can see about carjackings, you can see that there's a lot of incidents of carjackings, but the arrest rate is quite low. The folks that are arrested, the largest portion of them are kids. That's often because kids act in groups. And so carjackings occur when 2, 3, 4 kids together committed crime. And they also, frankly, are caught with more frequency than adults. I can't tell you that all of the unsolved carjackings were committed by adults or children, I don't know. But I do know that we were seeing a lot more of them in the last year. And look, our approach to prosecuting kids charged with violent crime, particularly violent gun crime, is that we charge kids and we ask for the courts to detain them for a period of time and to make sure that rehabilitative services are provided to them. Now, juvenile crime is different, and the theory of prosecution is different than adult crime, because of course, for children, we always look to protecting the public safety interests first and foremost, the interests of the community, and then we have to look at the rehabilitative needs of the child. It's not punitive in the way that the adult system is. And so sometimes that means that a court makes a determination that a child's rehabilitative needs are better served back in the community, and so kids are seen back in the community after having committed violent crime sometimes. And we, again, I've heard of a lot of concerns about kids coming back into the community. But our approach is always that we keep public safety in mind first, and then we really are focused on rehabilitative needs of children. We have pretty good rates of prosecution. We actually are prosecuting more kids for violent crime now than we were last year. And even though there are fewer kids that have been arrested this year for violent crime, all violent crime is down in DC. Of those that are arrested, we're prosecuting more of them because MPD is bringing us very strong cases. And so even though the numbers of kids being arrested are down, the number we're prosecuting is actually up. quite make sense, but that's really what's happening. But I can't sit here and tell you that you should feel better about that, and that, because perception is reality, right? We still are concerned about our safety and our community. And I can just tell you that we continue to work hand in hand with FP to address those cases, and we are seeing better outcomes. Go ahead.
No, I just want to answer that.
Definitely true. I mean, so much of prosecution, as you know, is reactive, but we want to be more proactive. And so we work with our partners like DHS and DBH to provide programming for people. I'll say just quickly about the traffic violence piece of it. We are seeing an uptick in traffic violence. We are seeing more people being arrested for traffic violence lately than we've had in the past. And we actually, just because of the good generosity of the council, we just hired a new traffic violence prosecutor who's focusing on the more egregious traffic violence cases that come to our office. If there is a fatality in a traffic accident, that case is first evaluated by the U.S. Attorney's Office to see if there would be a felony that they would prosecute. If they decline to prosecute it, then we would take over and prosecute reckless driving, aggravated reckless driving, speeding, those sorts of offenses. But I can tell you that my lawyers that are doing those cases have quite high case loads right now. We are prosecuting them, and we are handling them. But it is a problem. The traffic violence has been problematic.
So just one last thing on juveniles. I mean, it is, we see it in the press. I mean, some of the things that you're seeing happening, it's heartbreaking. I went to YS to tour the youth detention facilities, New Beginnings in YSC, and sat with some kids and asked, how old are you? 14, 15. What do you mean for carjacking and robbery? And you talk to the folks at the school, because there's Maya Angelou who is in both of those entities. And they say, when the kids come in, they test them, and they're fifth grade. So this goes to what David is saying about getting it early. This is why education has been so important to me over the years. You got a kid who's gone through COVID, stayed at home, been in a dysfunctional situation, fallen further behind in school, and then they're doing terrible things, and it's happening way too much, and we gotta bend that. But it's out there, and one of the things that the council did in Secure DC was to create a presumption of pretrial detention and setting of the violent crime with where juveniles involved. It's a tragedy that we will not let juveniles get into that situation where they're committing that crime. But if that's the lifestyle that they've chosen, until we can get that turned around, we gotta get them off the streets. And so that's a thing that we did in the law to try to address this. We're gonna have to step back and see what's working and what's not, but that's a tangible thing. Then you have questions from online?
Yeah, so thanks, folks. We're going to take a few questions that we got online. I'm going to read those first, and I think this will be for MPD. I'd like to know any updates on the robberies of Main Street stores along MacArthur and how they're being dealt, and any other news about those recent incidents that are related. Yeah, I believe they references the slam and rob of Main Street stores along MacArthur.
Yeah, I'm Captain Haskins. I can speak on that. So A lot of progress has been made on those cases, so I think we will be able to get good news on closures very soon on it. So good news on it, and we don't expect the same brokers to strike again.
Thank you. Next question. Metro continues to suffer from fare evasion. We can expect the Trump administration to decrease funding for transit. Is the council considering reversing the policy of decriminalizing fare evasion?
So we've made changes to the law around fare evasion, and what we did in legislation was in direct response to what was asked for by the transit. I think we're taking steps on fare evasion, and I think that it's not good, and it's particularly bad on buses, and we need to in the metro stations. We have the new gates, and that really helps a lot, but on buses it continues to be a challenge. But until WMATA comes to us and says, here's what we think you should do, I don't think we're gonna be, it's not on my agenda right now, but I'm all ears if there's something constructive that we can do. In terms of Trump administration, that's the elephant in the support for, none of us know what's coming. We need to protect our autonomy and respond to what comes. Support for things like WMATA, that's a scary thing, but it hasn't happened yet, and we're gonna have to deal with it.
Great, and I'll do one more and then we'll go back to these folks in the room. Thanks for your patience. There are several questions, and I think they can be summarized by the end of one of our participants' question. And it's, I think it'll be for DHS, and I would characterize it as there's a general lack of understanding, or a lot of questions around how enforcement and accountability can work within a voucher program that DHS operates. So what do we mean by accountability, and what are the steps that can be taken when there is behavior that needs to be corrected? I just think there are several people in the chat looking for just more of an understanding of those issues.
Well, I think we need to build that question. And so I think there is a presumption that we can make people do things. The district follows what the nation follows as a first model. And that recognizes that our unhoused come not federally unhoused. The majority of our unhoused have a range of issues, from behavioral health issues, substance abuse, and housing temporarily, permanently our unhoused residents with those multiple complex issues doesn't solve those issues overnight. It's actually for that work to happen. When we house residents, our case management is housing focused. We want to ensure that we're working with residents housing stability plan that does not mandate that people engage in substance abuse services, because those are not requirements to wanting and needing to stay. Once we are successful in putting those residents into a temporary housing situation, work begins with our partners. That provides accompanying services to our residents, to encourage them to the services they need, not just so that they can work with you, so that they can proceed with life. When it's going to look for work, that's important. That will be. And so when we say monitoring, we're monitoring to ensure residents are fully a plan that will lead them to their goal of a safe and sustainable housing situation. Work with our systems to help residents address other co-occurring issues.
So I'm going to chime in here too, and it's not just about any kind of pay or
our eviction system is broken. So with a voucher, there is an expectation and a requirement that you adhere to the terms of your lease. And for everybody, there is an expectation that you adhere to the terms of your lease. And we have gotten to a place where the courts are so clogged, and the point about having somebody from the judiciary, one of the big things that somebody from the judiciary would say is, we need more judges, because we need the Democratic Senate to get this done for us in the next month. But eviction turns out to be an incredibly difficult thing to do, even in a setting when somebody is in severe violation of their lease. We have tried to do, the courts set up a system to try to fast track cases where the violation was related to violence or threats of violence to another tenant or to employees of the landlord. And that can make some difference, but still gummed up. I think this is a place where David is talking about the rules that apply to him now and the values that apply. I wonder, and this is a conversation that we can be having, where there's somebody who's benefiting from that, where there's anybody who's in violation of the lease, they have to be accountable. I don't want to be pro-eviction, but I want accountability around it, because all of their neighbors are suffering when they're not in violation. In a setting where it's a voucher, one of the things that DHS had talked about was there's permanent supportive housing and permanent supportive housing plus. And the idea is there are some settings where the services need to, and there's been the idea of tenant-based permanent supportive housing, so just, they go where they go, or site-based, where you have places like, it's not exactly like this, but Woodley House on Connecticut Avenue, where it's a site where people live and support. And there may be situations where site-based makes more sense for somebody. It really gives them a chance to get out of their feet. And so, is there something we could do that could empower the agencies to try to have people who are creating issues for themselves and for their neighbors be housed, but be housed in a place that the services will. And that will require doing a lot of different things. It may require changing the law. It may also require having more places like that where the services are. So there's a place here, and there's a frustration out there. There are folks who are clear problems and nothing's happening, but that's not limited to voucher context. That is much more broadly, and it's a whole other set of challenges that we need to. To explore innovative opportunities to better serve our I think I am. Okay, so I have blown past the place where I was supposed to give a 10-minute warning, to the place where I was supposed to call us to a close, but I'm not, I'm in effect gonna give the 10-minute warning here, and I apologize to everyone that I'm gonna keep us over a little, because I wanna make sure that all of the questions that have been raised can be answered. What I'd like to do is, there's 3 people standing, I don't know, Lisa, if you're going to join them. I'd like you to all, one after the other, ask your questions and then let us respond to them so that we can close this out efficiently, but give everybody the chance to have their say. So, sir, would you like to go?
Yeah, hi, I'm Joe Gelatish. I live at 3003 as well. And I wanted to ask about are you coordinating with management of these buildings where you have, not just necessarily the Section 8 tenants, but all the rental buildings that are in the community about safety? Are you coordinating with the management? Because I'm sure condominium buildings with owners, co-op buildings and individual single-family homes, the residents are very eager to have a safe community, where in the rental properties, you're more likely to have the management as a part of play a bigger role in that. I know specifically 3003, there's a perimeter door that is invariably broken on Veazey Street. And I send them emails that we're going to fix it, we're going to fix it. And I was told, I emailed the manager and said, one of the doors has magnetic latch or magnetic catch and no latch, and it's never broken. Why does this one not have it as well? Except that it probably costs $10,000. Now, you did say we're getting a new door. Maybe that's what it is. But my point is, they're not willing to spend the money to make it safe. And they're breaking, they don't much care if laws are broken. And to a higher level, when I tried to rent the apartment I now live in with my mother, which is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, she had lived there for 19 years in a 1-bedroom. She's now almost 89. About a year ago, it became clear that I needed to live with her. I began asking about 2-bedroom, 2-bath units. They're all exactly the same. Different prices because it's a rent-controlled building. I was told 3 times about units that were available, advertised as available for immediate occupancy, that they were unavailable to be seen that day. There was damage to it. There was a leak. There was this. There was that. It's a disaster. We don't know when it's going to be fixed. It's just unimaginable when this could be done. And they're telling me that. And I worked for 30 years in high-end remodeling. I've done bathrooms that cost $100,000 and kitchen that cost $300,000. They told me it was going to take us 6 weeks to put vanity in my unit. And then basically they've been harassing me or neglecting me ever since because I pushed for it. It took 6 weeks for us to get approved, despite showing significant income. I know they broke their housing law. And the irony of it all, in the 1980s, my father was assistant general counsel for public housing at HUD downtown. And they're trying to tell me, like, I said, what's the income to rent ratio? No answer. How long does it take to get approved? No answer. How long does it, how do you take savings into this? No answer. How do I get added to the lease? No answer. Now my apartment usually smells like a singles bar circa 1982 from the smoke of a neighbor. They can't do anything about it. Well, they haven't even investigated, let alone start the process. And so I think you need to be somewhat on the, certainly that building, their management, and possibly some of the other rental buildings too, working with the management and supervising the management. And I know for a fact they were trying to encourage Section 8 housing in an attempt to undermine the rent control laws and raise the rents. And they've got a $9 million company, Equity Real Estate, behind them that helps them do this. And I just got, my letter writing, my email writing, and my suit for $10,000 in small claims weren't about the smoke. But
okay, so I'm gonna break my own rule and just react very quickly. So yes, one of the things that our office very frequently does is reaching out to landlords on issues like this. They are a serious, serious problem. In terms of the locks on the doors, one of your other neighbors here, Garal, I'm sure he's watching. He's in very close touch with us. I'm fully aware of those issues. There's going to be a hearing on the SAFE Act, which part of the whole idea of the SAFE Act grows out of buildings like yours, if not specifically your building. And so your building will feature prominently in the discussion of that legislation that's coming up. I can't tell you that, I wish there was more that we could have been able to do. We are trying all of the time. Well, that's what the Safe Act is about.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Gore. I'm Chair of ANC 34G, which is Chevy Chase. I'm also a retired fellow investigator, special agent in charge from the IG's Office of HUD. So housing is something that I'm very still connected to. I just kind of want to piggyback on the last gentleman's comment. I think we are absolutely right to focus on some of the tenant issues. We talked about the landlord issues. In my line of work, we obviously know that management agents and owners are a huge problem. I've worked housing in Washington, D.C. since I started federal investigations, like in 1990, and I started before then, but that's when I came to DC working on these issues. So this is not a new issue. It's been an issue in this city for as long as I've been here. I really, really hope that the council and the city gets serious with holding management agents and owners accountable. It breaks my heart to have worked federal investigations for almost 30 years and still hear people in this audience and in this city talk about rats being dead in the walls, killing rats, all the things that we have seen going on in our buildings. It is heartbreaking. I don't know what the council is doing or is focused on that. I don't know what agencies in the city are focused on that. And I know, and you know, we don't want to get to a nuisance property case. Working those cases, and I've worked them here on the federal judge now, Rudy Contreras. I've worked with him. So we know those take a long time and they are extremely complicated to make. If we get to that point, we have already failed. So we have got to hold that class of folks accountable. And I don't know if the council needs to come up with legislation. I'd be happy to sit down and talk to people about it, but that has got to be a major focus because that is part of the safety ecosystem. It's one thing to have tenants doing things in your building that's causing harm, but we have to have mothers, women, children, residents going to safe buildings, and these buildings are not safe. And these owners are being paid federal dollars. I'm very familiar with the federal rules and the requirements. They are under contract with either the housing authority or the agencies within our city to maintain those buildings in a certain way in order to get the rent that they get, the subsidy that they get from the city. We've got to take that serious. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you want to bring us home?
Not too much further.
I feel like I have some seniority here now, although I have some friends back here who've been working on this issue for probably 7 years. One, I'd like to ask a question about the SAFE Act, and it's something I've talked with your office. Condos are left out of the SAFE Act for the most part, it seems, unless there's language in there that I just don't interpret. But some very terrible things have happened in our building and in other buildings. Sexual assault of a staff member. The person was allowed to stay for another 1.5 years where he would come downstairs and taunt her, you know, consistently. There's been drug dealing, and it's a significant part of the population for condo owners, and we have a lot of rentals too. So I feel like the SAFE Act is kind of creating two tiers: the landlords and the renters who will be protected, and the landlords will be held accountable. But then in condos, what do? There's these LLCs that hopefully with new legislation we'll know more about them and their names, and we can go after them. They do not watch their clients. They don't respond. They will, part of the problem is overpayments that I know HUD is still working on. There's no reason for them to show up, and you can't evict. I mean, people have lost their homes in my building because they couldn't live there any longer. And so the city is kind of just, I mean, the big problem is in the apartment buildings, but I hope that condos can be, and townhouses too, anyone with an HOA. And The other thing I just want to say is that I'm a mom to a child in 5th grade at Murch Elementary. And the feeling of sort of threats and things have come closer to home, especially with the loss of DeAndre Pettis. I have made comments probably for 5 years on different Zooms, hearings, etc., about the lack of services. And they never came. And buildings like 4500 Connecticut were listed consistently. The building Sedgwick, where the little girl died, has been listed consistently. It's all over the Washington Post. Again, I'll commend MPD for every time in the past 5 years that help is needed, they've showed up. And we go way back to Commander Bedlington. And some of these people say, some of these officers say, well, we're doing everything we can, but we need our other agencies to step up. But that's been the case for a long time. So I want to know what's going to be different this time. Yes.
So that goes back to what I shared earlier and Councilmember Frumin shared. When issues arise, then we get notified. Confidentiality, we care. But I can say a lot of attention has been brought to stuff beyond small people assume. So it's back to what the gentleman said in the back. We have issues around our shelters, some shelters, and populations operating. So it's about how do we create safe spaces for everyone, regardless of how their work is state or district. So while we support our communities for housing-based management to get the housing and market system, those ancillary issues that are if we don't turn on then we see issues with more high profile issues that are but our responsibility. Citizens are aware of situations that participants themselves haven't been able to give us a call and and if they're
I'm gonna close this out. I'm grateful to everybody for coming. I'm grateful to everybody for staying. And again, particularly to the panel. It's interesting. Here we are in Connecticut Avenue, and a lot of this conversation has been about Connecticut Avenue, about the apartment buildings and different dimensions to the challenges in those apartment buildings. This is public safety in Ward 3, and I think in a way, maybe next one we should do it in a different place so that we make sure that we're hearing the other issues that are out there. I do think on the big picture on crime that we are doing well in making progress. There is a lot more that needs to be done. There is the element of getting kids before they get into the justice system so that that could be the most important way that we cut back on Connecticut Avenue. Here are my takeaways. Here's the message. One is a strong sense of we need to be sure that where there are people who need to have services, that they're getting adequate services. And I'm 100% sure of that, and we figure out the ways that we can make that happen. Two, where there's situations where there are people who are not complying with their obligations under their lease, where they're acting out in ways that are detrimental to other residents, that we have ways to address those issues that don't appear to exist. That the biggest
you have situations where deteriorating conditions of buildings, because landlords aren't making the investments that they need to. You can have compromised safety, where they're not taking steps, simple steps, like getting the doors locked, that can make everybody safer. And that's what animates the SAFE Act that is in front of the council now. Where that lands, is it going to be exactly what's in the SAFE Act now, or is it going to be, will we build on it from what we hear on December 10th? I think we need to do something. I think it's really important for the people to have come out here to raise those issues, to come on December 10th or join us on Zoom and say those things loud and clear so all of my colleagues get the message that folks want landlords held accountable. And we see you could have done it in a more compelling way. I 100% agree with you. We need to take tangible steps to try to do that. And you can help us to do that by contributing with your testimony and your action on December 10th. For now, I've kept everybody over, but I want to again close by thanking everybody for coming out, and let's work together to make this place safer.